Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Apologies on starting just like 1 minute late. I was trying to get that taskbar to close, and I did make it close, so mission accomplished, but that was the reason I was a minute late, so apologies. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about Microsoft SharePoint Online. This is a level 200 course, so do keep that in mind. It has somewhat of an expectation that you have a little bit of a background knowledge on SharePoint. Today's session is going to be primarily focusing on planning and designing your SharePoint site. And the session will be recorded, so you can always access the video on demand for the next 180 days. We are also in a Teams live event, so your camera and microphone will automatically be disabled. Now, there is a Q&A area that I encourage you to utilize throughout the session. So you should see the Q&A populate on the right-hand side of your screen. I did make a couple of announcements in there, and I'll also be sharing a couple of resources throughout the session. So be sure to check back in there periodically. I've already posted your email and phone number for support. So if you do have any questions outside of the session or need any type of assistance, those support resources are already in the Q&A, so be sure to jot those down prior to leaving the session today. Also, once the session concludes, there is a survey that Northwestern has provided, so you can also find that directly in the Q&A. Now, if you would like to hide the Q&A or show the Q&A, you can just select the icon that looks like two chat bubbles with a question mark on top. Below that, there are two separate tabs. There's a featured tab and my questions tab. So the featured tab is going to have all of those, resources that I'm kind of talking about right now. And then at the bottom, you can input your name and question. If you would prefer to post anonymously, you have the ability to do so, but I encourage you to at least use your first name so that way we can call out or comment on questions based on the individual who asked them. And also, please just take an extra moment to ensure you're putting your name and question in the proper location. We just want to make sure that your questions don't get cut off and that they're very easy to read and understand, so that way we can get back to you in a timely manner. At the bottom of the screen, you have your meeting controls. So you do have the ability to pause the event, to rewind it. Make sure your audio is turned up, and if it ever goes out, this is the best location to check first. On the far right-hand side, you can turn on live captions. The cog icon will have some additional settings and customizations for you, so feel free to explore all those features. And to go into full screen mode, just select the two arrows. My name is Cassandra, and I also have Jorge here with me. We are both Microsoft Training Associates, and we're from the Chicagoland area. We have both been with Microsoft for a number of years, so we're both really excited to be here and work with all of you today. Jorge will most likely drop about halfway through the presentation, so I'll be answering any questions that come through verbally at that point, but he will assist with any questions as needed, and then I'll probably be calling them out. So just be on the lookout for me answering your questions verbally. I'll be glancing at that Q&A. And I've worked with Northwestern a good amount of times now, so if you've attended any of our other sessions, hopefully I am a familiar face or voice at least, but I'm excited to be here and work with all of you today, and this is actually one of my favorite sessions to teach because I personally have a pretty big passion for design, and we talk a lot about kind of designing your SharePoint sites today, so I have a lot of fun with this session, and my favorite part of this session is that there is no coding needed. I went to school for web development and quickly learned that I did not want to be a web developer. It's just a little challenging to do a lot of coding. But if you're good at it, hey, great, good for you. I am not, but I am good at design. And with SharePoint, you don't need any type of coding involved. There's no coding involved. You can use web parts, so we'll be talking about that later. But anyways, let's get started with the content. Thanks for attending. This information is already located in the Q&A, so if you do need any additional support, feel free to grab this information from the Q&A. And prior to leaving the session today, please be sure to fill out that survey. This is for Northwestern's use, not for Microsoft. On our agenda, we're going to talk about planning your site. We will then be building a site, and I'll be talking about templates. So, you don't have to start from scratch. You definitely can, but the templates are really nice because you can have at least a little bit of a format already built for you, and you can kind of just fill in the context. We'll also be talking about managing usage and permissions, and we'll be discussing Q&A throughout the session. SharePoint Online is used by organizations to create websites, so you can use SharePoint as a secure place to store, organize, share, and access information from any device. All you need is your web browser. You can communicate news through a company-wide, custom-built and secure internal intranet. We call this a communication site, and you have the option to select an existing template or showcase your creativity with a blank slate. No matter which one you choose, you do have the ability to add, remove, or reorder web parts as needed. So that's why I personally love to use templates, because it's still customizable. It's not set in stone, but you have a little bit more to work with starting out. Now, there's two types of SharePoint sites. We just talked a little bit about communication sites. Hopefully you were able to attend the 100 course, because we go a little bit more into a deep dive of the differences between the sites. But in case you didn't, there's two different types of SharePoints that you can have. It's a team SharePoint site and a communication site. A team SharePoint site is directly connected to an M365 group and is typically connected to a Microsoft team. It doesn't have to be, but it usually is. And then a communication site is not connected to an M365 group or team. It's made to communicate information to a much larger and broader audience. So if you are using a team SharePoint site, when you generate a Microsoft team, a corresponding SharePoint site is generated and backed up there. That is where all of your files are actually stored when you upload them to a channel. So once again, we kind of talked a lot about this in the 100 course, but just giving you a little bit of a refresher in case you weren't able to attend or you're still a little bit newer to Microsoft Teams, or to Microsoft SharePoint, excuse me. Microsoft 365, I should say, because this is kind of when the dots start to connect. There is a search bar available in SharePoint, so you can easily search through files, sites, news, and people. You can also transform your business processes with many applications that integrate directly in SharePoint, including Microsoft Power Platform. So you can use Power Automate, Power BI, Power Apps. The Power BI Apps connection within SharePoint is pretty cool. Like if you have a Microsoft list, there's actually an integration where you could turn a list very quickly into a application, like literally with 2 clicks of a button. We show this off in our Power Apps demonstration. Now, Power Platform is a extension to your license, so you may or may not have access to Power Platform, but that is just one of the many applications that integrate into SharePoint. You can integrate Microsoft Planner, which is a project management tool. I just briefly talked about lists, but lists and libraries have direct integration. And each SharePoint will have a minimum of 50 gigabytes of data. It can also become relatively large, like 25 terabytes of data. 1,000 gigabytes equals 1 terabyte, so you can do the math. All right, now we're going to hop into our live demo. Nice little Bing background today. Paris. I actually just watched Midnight in Paris last night, first time. I'm a Loki fan, and it was Loki and that one actor. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry. I don't know either of their names. I just know their character names. But Midnight in Paris, pretty cute movie. It's on Netflix if you want to watch. Okay. To access SharePoint, you're going to go to office.com, log in with your credentials, and then you'll see a similar landing page to this. Now, for today, I am signed into a EDU tenant. So I understand that some of you may or may not be on EDU tenants, but I believe that most of you should be on EDU tenants. So we'll be seeing a lot of education examples. Excuse me, my term. We use a lot of acronyms at Microsoft. EDU stands for education. I would assume that you know that, but I'm not, so I'm not going to make assumptions. So this is an education tenant. Things are slightly different in SharePoint with education, but very minimal. So even if you're on an enterprise account, it's all going to be relative. It's really the document library that has the biggest difference when it comes to the education tenants. And I did conduct a SharePoint 100 course. I want to say it was this week. Could have been yesterday or 2 days ago. But I talked a lot of, I actually figured that out the other day where the document library is a little bit different in SharePoint. So I'll call that out again today because it's something good to know. Once you go to office.com and log in, the waffle menu at the top left-hand corner, this is your app launcher. And this is where you will find Microsoft SharePoint. So I will open this up. And just once again, as a brief refresher, there are two different types of sites that can be generated within SharePoint. There's a team site and a communication site. Team sites are directly connected to M365 groups. They typically are private. They can be public, but in most scenarios, they're private. And they're made to communicate and collaborate with tools and resources that you need to really get your everyday tasks and responsibilities done. A communication site is not connected to an M365 group, and this is to share information with a much larger audience. Most users are consuming the information when they're on communication sites, while in team sites, they're usually grabbing the tools and resources that they need to be productive on a day-to-day basis. Now, an example of this is at Microsoft, I work for the direct sales and support organization. We're a smallish organization within Microsoft. And for our organization as a whole, we have around, let's say, 2,000 employees, give or take. We have a communication site. That communication site has basically information regarding our organization as a whole. So we have like different focus areas, they're called within Microsoft. So I reside in the training focus area, but we have like small business, EDU, assisted sales. And so we can get information on really all those different areas of the business when it comes to this site. Might be including strategies, policies, upcoming events. There's even much larger and broader communication sites, like having a HR website where we can access all of our HR resources. Also policies, benefits, so on and so forth. So communication sites are like a much broader topic, I would say, while team sites are very niche towards like whatever that specific topic is. And it's more collaborative because it's connected to a group. Now, communication sites also have many more pages because most users are consuming the content. While in team sites, as I've been saying, it's more collaborative. You're grabbing those resources that you need on an everyday basis. So that's a little bit of a refresher on the two. Just to solidify that refresher, we're going to hop into an not an M365 group. We're going to hop into a team SharePoint site. And I'm going to go into this physical science SharePoint site. You can tell that this is a team SharePoint site because it has that group verbiage. And this particular site is dedicated to my physical science course. This particular site is also connected to a Microsoft team because it has this Teams logo here, and that is directly connected to Microsoft Teams. So what that means is that how this particular site was generated, it was generated within Microsoft Teams, because when you generate a Microsoft team, it generates a corresponding SharePoint site on the back end, and that is where all of your files are stored. So you always have that option to open in SharePoint. How your files are organized from Teams to SharePoint is it's based on the folders, or based on the channels. So every channel that is generated, when you go into SharePoint, it will have those channels. So if I go into this class materials tab, this is what's different about the EDU license is it will have by default class materials as your tab. But then if you hover over next to the title class materials, you're going to have this drop down menu for like class files, documents, and more. So you get a little bit more options when it comes to the document library for EDU tenants, while in enterprise tenants, it's just like a general document library. So if we go to documents, those folders are separated based on the channels. So that's how SharePoint does it on the back end. Now, another way you can also identify that this is a team SharePoint site, because some sites will not have a team connected to it. So keep that in mind. It's all dependent on how someone generates the SharePoint. The navigation is on the left-hand side. The navigation will be at the top when it's a communication site. And also this is connected to an M365 group, because you can see that there are 18 users that are added to this specific site. Now, if I navigate to a communication site, it's going to be a little bit different. So I'll go into this School Central. Right off the bat, you can see there's no members. So we don't see, members at the top right-hand corner. And then we can also see that the navigation is at the top of the screen versus on the side. And there's also a cascading menu. Now, I just want to glance at your policies real fast, because I want to make sure that I'm telling you the correct information. Okay. Awesome. I think I was thinking about a different customer, and I wanted to make sure that you could connect it to M365 groups. So a couple of policies that are going to be aware of is that you will not generate SharePoint sites. You'll go through like a ticket process. Normally Blake is on the call, so if he joins later, I'll ask him to share that with you, but there is like a ticket process you would go to have the site generated. Once it's generated, you'll be able to, customize it and stuff, but they have to generate for you. And then you are allowed to add external members to your sites, except for the med school. So med school is an exception to that policy. Now, communication sites, because communicating to a much larger audience. So as I just said, that other one was for physical science, while this one is for the entire school. So much more niche. There's going to be many more pages when it comes to communication sites, and this is considered a page. So this is like where we really integrate those web parts and kind of think about the most important information, because most people are going to be consuming this information. So like additional resources, campus maps, school forms, tech help, so on and so forth. So that's a refresher of the different types of sites. It is important to understand the difference because they have much different intentions. The design of them is not crazy different. It's just the intention is very different, and the navigation is also different. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is actually planning your site. So I have a good resource to share with you, and I'm going to paste this in the Q&A right now. So bear with me for one moment as I paste that. So this is, well, here, let me copy this first. So copy. This is an article that is pretty robust in walking you through what you should be thinking about when it comes to planning your site. So prior to you even going through that submission of, asking for a site, you should have a strategy as what this site is going to be for and, what it's going to do for your users. So I did just post that in the Q&A, and you can save that for your future use. Now, this particular article is geared towards communication sites, but I think it's very relative to a team site as well. And there's still a lot of good resources and things to think about within this article, whether you're doing a communication site or you're doing a team SharePoint site. Most of you guys will probably be using team SharePoint sites, but still very relative information. And it tells you that right here. So you can still follow the guidance in this article, but understand that the team site generally has a much smaller audience with very specific goals and tasks that need to be accomplished. Communication sites are designed for broad communication. So it kind of gives you that little discretion right there. But outside of that, it's going to tell you what you should be thinking about. So understanding your audience is key. Who are your viewers? What are they looking for? What are they wanting to learn or do? What are the top tasks that they need to perform? on a day-to-day basis? What terms make sense to them? What outcomes do you want to achieve? How will your site, be successful? Real life examples of defining business outcomes. So as an employee, I need to find out about leadership development programs that are available to me for my role so that I can easily register for required and elective learning opportunities. Or as an employee, find learning resources such as leadership-oriented content publications that I have access to, so that way I can be more successful in my job. Planning your site's content, your pages. Pages will be a lot more minimal when it comes to team SharePoint sites, but as I said, they're very heavily used within communication sites. Your lists and libraries is something that you'll use within team SharePoint sites. So this is referring to that document library I just was referencing a little bit ago. So this will give you some good tips into document libraries. Also, this article has so many additional resources. So as you're reading through it, you might be like, what does that mean? Or, I want to learn how to do this. There is so many articles that are directly linked up to this page. So I think it's a really good resource to have and to save, even as you're designing your SharePoint, because you also, we'll talk about this later, but you have some analytics that you can use to understand how people are utilizing your site. So you may be going back to the drawing board and you're probably going to go through a couple different versions of your site. And in reality, you should be constantly updating your site because I'm sure things are always changing within your organization. At least that's how it is for me. I mean, as a university, I would assume it's probably similar to you though, because you have new semesters, you got new courses happening, things are always changing. So that's a little bit about the strategy of planning your site. I obviously don't have the free time to just sit here and go through every single bullet point. So I'll give you that as like your homework assignment. Even if you're not going to be the one hosting your sites, it's not a bad idea to have an understanding of it, because you could always help in the future and say like, hey, I think a site would be helpful. And if you have a background of it, that'll definitely be helpful to you and your peers. Now that we have, gone through the strategy, we've met with our peers, we've kind of really figured out and fine-tuned the ideas of what the SharePoint is going to have. Now let's actually get into designing it. So I think I haven't done this algebra course yet. I've started to design all my other sites and make them look really nice. It's probably because I'm scared of algebra. Not a math fan. I wish I was, but it just doesn't like me. So it is what it is. Let's talk about designing your site. So these are all web parts, okay? So to change these web parts, we did introduce this in the 100, but we're going to spend a little bit more time on it. So I'm going to go to this edit button at the top right-hand corner, and this is going to allow me to edit my landing page. So right now I'm in a landing page. Prior to actually editing, there's a couple things I'd like to show off. Now, on the left-hand side of your landing page, there is this new drop-down menu. And this is the location when it comes to team SharePoint sites, how you can generate additional pages or additional document libraries and more applications as needed. As I was saying before, when it's a team SharePoint site, most of the time your landing page is going to be most important. I don't think a ton of people, when it comes to Teams SharePoint site, the main reason that they come to Teams SharePoint site, from my personal experience, is for the document library. But you can still make this a central hub for like all of your resources that you need. But you can make the landing page really fun. You can make it creative, make people maybe want to use SharePoint a little bit more. If it looks ugly, do people really want to come on it? Probably not. So it's kind of your job to make people want to come to the site. And if you make it really aesthetically pleasing, like where it looks almost like a normal website and you have a lot of good tools and resources, then people will want to use it. And that's your goal, is you don't want to tell people to use it. You want them to use it. So I would say if you're starting out, your landing page is where you should make it really like nice and pretty and think about the tools that your team needs on an everyday basis. So because this particular site is pertaining to algebra, we can see that there's a little welcome note from probably the professor. They did include the document library directly on the landing page. So this is just a shortcut versus them having to navigate to the class materials. They can find some of that information right here. Also have some quick links like the Student Help Center, the reference materials, textbooks. So these are tools that your students will need or your teammates will need. Upcoming events. So it's kind of nice. In this case, the professor kind of wrote down their key dates that their students need to remember, like their final. That's pretty important. But we maybe need to update this to the spring semester because this is still pertaining to the fall. Have some class announcements, so some blog articles that the professor finds helpful, tips for remote learning, midterms in 2 weeks and how to prepare early, and then a little introduction about the professor and also her contact information. So this site is pretty good for my algebra class. I've got some good tools and resources, and I definitely would feel comfortable telling my students to come to this site. But I would also like to make it a little bit more visually pleasing. And right now I've got like pretty much no images outside of these announcements. So I'd like to make a nice header image because that's how most websites are when you come to them. You have a nice kind of intro header image. And I could also include some resources with those header images. So I'm going to go to the edit button. And here we can see all my different web parts. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections total. And then these are different layouts. So this particular layout, this is a, this section is a 1/3 left. This is a 1-column layout. You can see 1 column. This one is also 1 column. This is a 2-column layout. And this is a 1-column layout. So to make a new section, I will select this plus sign right here. And then it'll ask me to select my columns. Now I can always change this, so keep that in mind. So I'll do 2 columns. Now to add a web part, I have the plus signs in the middle of the section. So like I said, no coding needed, just pluses. I love it. And then I can choose what I feel would be most helpful. I actually want to turn this into a 1/3 right column. So I want this to be slightly bigger. So I can easily change that and select the plus sign. And in here, I'm going to do this hero image. And I want, right now it's a 5 hero image. I want it to just be 1 image. So I'm going to go to the pencil icon right here. You'll notice that the icons will start to be the same, but they are referring to different areas of the web part. So these icons are pertaining to the section, and if you hover over them, it tells you that too. These particular icons are pertaining to the web part, and then once I add some elements to the web part, there will be more icons that populate. So I want to edit this web part. I think I might have to turn this into a 1-column layout just to start with. So edit the web part, and I want to make this 2 tiles. There we go. And then now I'm going to change this section back to a 1/3 right. There we go. And in here, I'm going to put a nice image. So I will select the link. I'm going to use a stock image. You get plenty of stock images to utilize. Type in math and see what pops up. And I guess we'll use this one. Not too many math images. Or maybe I could make it really fun because I'm going to Vegas in a few weeks. So I've been learning about like probability of the casinos and stuff, like when you're playing poker or blackjack. Maybe I include a fun article about using math for gambling. I'm not saying you should do that, but learn about the probability when you play poker or something like that. I can make it really fun. I'm just like having some fun here. But now you can see I got a nice image in here. So I'm going to go off that idea. Maybe I don't use the term gambling because, we're professional, but I talk about like poker or, some of those games because there's a lot of probability involved in that, a lot of math involved in that. So my partner really enjoys that. I don't. More of like, I hope the luck is in my favor. So I'm going to give this a title. And I'll say learn about ability in card games. And then maybe I link it up to a fun, article. I'm sure I could just bing an article and something would pop up. I would go to the options, and then I could also do a call to action, and then I would just include that link there. So while obviously I'm just making up a scenario here, I'm just having some fun because this is a demonstration. You'll want to be slightly more strategic about what type of resources you're including, but also don't be afraid to have a little bit of fun because once again, it's your goal to make people want to come to this site. And if you start to include kind of fun stuff like this, maybe things that interest you, people might want to use it a little bit more. So just a little thought. And I don't have a link, but all I would have to do is find that link and paste it into here, and then that learn more would navigate everyone in this, in this site to that particular article. Or it could be a resource, or it could be a document, like you can really choose. Now, as I said, I have some more icons here. So like I could change the focal point if I wanted to. Maybe I want to make the dice a little bit, more up so that way it's not cut off. I could also zoom in a little bit. So we kind of got a blank background. So I think zooming in is kind of nice. And then if I did need to move items around or edit it further, I always have that pencil icon to pop up. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the next one. And maybe this one will be a little bit more serious, not so fun. And I'll make a stock image again and talk about, I'll type in team and see what pops up. And we will use, let's actually type meeting instead. That might be better. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so we'll do this one, hit insert. And then in here, maybe we say finals are coming. Check out these resources to prepare. Once again, I can make a call to action and then link it to wherever I see as fit. So now I got a nice little, hero image in here. You can see that a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. We're kind of having some more fun. And then in this web part, I'll add a different one. Maybe I want to include a organization chart, for instance, so that way they know who their teacher is. So like I could do Kara Coleman, and that would pull up all her information. So I'll just say your professor. And then I'll also maybe include the time zone. So I'll do, where is it? Oh, we could do the weather. That's always nice. Chicago. Oh, here. Face out. Type in Chicago. Now we got, and then you can keep adding on, you're just going to think about like what is important to everyone. And sometimes this type of stuff is just like a little bit extra. But once again, you're just making the experience better. I'm not saying this is the exact location you want to put it in. Like this would probably be more appropriate in this section. So maybe what I want to do is I want to drag these quick links up here. I think they would be better in here. And then vice versa, I'm going to drag, kind of this extra stuff down. Because I'm thinking about like, what do I want to be most important? And then I also think I would change this column at this point. This is a 2-column layout. I think this section would be better as a 1/3 right. so we have a little bit more space on the documents. Alrighty, so you get the idea. As you can see, it's really easy to move web parts, to add them to it, and there's a lot of web parts that you can use. So those are just a couple that I used today, but if you select this drop-down menu, you have many more. So like Microsoft Forms, maybe you want to get a poll on, how are people in this scenario, it's an algebra course, how are people feeling about the upcoming tests, you could take a poll and see how people are feeling, make it a little bit more interactive. This would also be a way to get people to come to the site. So you could say, hey, I posted a form on our SharePoint site. Please fill this out by the end of the week. That would maybe encourage people to use sites. So you can choose to not only include the most important resources, but you can also make it interactive, engaging, and include whatever resources that you need to make this site useful for you and others. So at this point, we're going to select republish. None of the changes I made will be active until I republish it, but you can see that all the changes I have made will be saved, and hit republish. Now, the only thing I don't like about this hero image is for some reason when I use that one column layout, it kind of makes the images slightly pixelated. And as I said, I'm a design nerd, so I don't really like when things are pixelated. So I think what I'd rather do is edit this section and make it one column and just have it go below. I think that looks better, right? Those images look better. And now I'll republish it. Much better, in my personal opinion. Okay. So that's how you can edit the web parts. Now this process is exactly the same for communication sites. So how you just saw me make those web parts and move them and reorder them, it's the same exact process in a communication site. It's just that the intention is very different. So that's why it's so important and why we keep emphasizing why I keep emphasizing, sorry, no one else here with me, why I keep emphasizing it's important, because if you don't understand the intention of the site, then it's going to be challenging to be strategic about it. Now, when it comes to your permissions on the sites, another thing that I also want to show you is templates. And there are many templates that are available to you, but templates are only available to owners of the site. I really don't know why. I feel like they should be available to others, but I guess it's so that way people don't mess up your sites. Your members should be able to edit the web parts as long as you permit them to do so. So if you do want to manage the permissions, you can go to the cog icon at the top right-hand corner, and then there is a little tab that says Site Permissions. This will kind of let you choose what your owners, members, and visitors can and cannot do. So in this particular site, there are a lot of owners. I would not encourage you to have this many owners. I would have 2 to 4 owners, minimum of 2, so that way you have at least 2 people managing it. And then also with the unforeseen circumstance of someone leaving, someone getting promoted, you don't ever have to worry about things not being managed. So always have at least 2, but then be cautious of having more than 4, because owners can basically most of the time they can do everything. So it actually looks like in SharePoint it does let you manage what your owners can do, but then that kind of defeats the whole purpose of what owners can do. So I would say anyone that you assign as an owner, they should essentially have full control. And that's how it works in Microsoft Teams. Like if you're an owner, you have full control. You cannot manage the permissions at all. But if you are a member, you can also choose what your members can and cannot do. And you could do this on a student or faculty basis. So even if you had a student that was a member, but maybe they're like a co-teacher or a co-professor, you could maybe still make them a member, but you can actually give members reading rights or full control. Like you can kind of choose what they can and cannot do. So I would say even though that SharePoint lets you change your, owner's rights, I would say your owners for the most time should have like kind of full control, and you should have around 2 to 4 owners. And then members, you can kind of choose what they can and cannot do. So if you just want them to have read only, if you do want them to have full control, if you want them to have full control, then I would just promote them to an owner though. So just some things to think and keep in mind, but the cog icon within here, the site permissions, that will allow you to choose what they can and cannot do. Visitors, same thing. I don't have any visitors, but visitors are external to the company. Remember that the med school does not have the option for visitors, so this will only pertain to those who are not in the med school. And visitors by default have just read only, from my understanding. Now, something to keep in mind when it comes to visitors, though, is if you're trying to just share like a file with them, I would encourage you to share an individual file or folder versus adding them to the entire site. I wouldn't add external folks to the entire site unless it's really necessary. Now, if you are an owner of the site or you have full control, you'll also see the option to apply a site template. And there are templates that are already made for you that you can utilize. I think I have to refresh the screen. There we go. So there are some templates that you can utilize. The templates that are built in is kind of strange, but for some reason, it might be different for you guys, but these are demo accounts that we use. And for some reason, even when I'm in the education account, there's not education examples in here, but there's another site that I'm going to talk about in just a moment that does have education templates. But this will give you a preview of what it is. And then literally all you have to do is select use this template and it will import this for you. And then you can just edit the web parts. You can still reorder them, delete them, do whatever you need to, but you at least have like a little bit of foundation. So if you're not a design geek like I am, and you don't want to start from scratch, I don't blame you. Even as someone who likes design, I like having templates because I can still change it, but at least it gets the ball rolling and gives me some ideas of what people maybe would want, especially if I'm newer to this. But outside of the templates that are there by default, there's also this site that's called a SharePoint Lookbook. I'll paste this into the chat as well. So here, keep doing it the opposite way. SharePoint Lookbook, copy it and paste. And here is the link. So if you would like to save this, another good resource. So that's posted in Q&A. Oh, it's not posting. Okay. Oh, okay, of course it went through like a bunch of times. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So that's posted in the Q&A. You can find it in there. But this has a lot more templates outside of those like 5 templates that we just saw. And there are also templates that are dedicated to schools. So right here, there is a tab that says schools. And these are education related templates. And they're actually using some of the templates that I was working with today. So there's a lot more than just schools. So you'll also find other ones that might pertain to you, especially if you are a university. So you might be working on something a little bit larger than just like these 3 templates that are available. But definitely come in here and explore the templates because there's some good resources and some good examples, and also can give you some inspiration. And then if you're using this for faculty, you have tons of organization or department templates as well. So you click on them, they give you, they show you exactly what it's going to look like. They tell you the site features, the web parts used, and then the content included, and then you can add it to your tenant. Now, I do not know the policies pertaining to adding it to your tenant. So if you do find a template that you think would be helpful, the next step I would do is contact that support phone number or the email that I shared in the very beginning of the presentation and just send them a message and say, hey, I found this template, like, am I allowed to import it? Because it might not work and not just pertaining to your policy. So just be sure to reach out and get clarification if you would like to use templates. I don't see why they wouldn't let you, but I also do not work for Northwestern, so I cannot, 100% say that if it would be available or if not. But at the bare minimum, you could use this as a guide. So even if you don't have the templates, you could easily design this. I mean, I think there was a little quote in there from a student that was like, I don't even need to code. I think right here. What 3 years ago took months of coding is now available out of the box with SharePoint. Oh, so it looks like they might have actually had to do some developing back in the day. That would make a lot of sense, but I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore. So that's a little bit about templates, your permissions, designing it, being strategic. Now, after you've started to use it, you also have this analytics tab. There's another one that's also included in the cog icon that says, I think it's site usage. No, it's either site usage or site performance. I want to say it's performance, actually. No, I lied. It is site usage. Back. Site usage. This will give you some analytics about your site so you can better understand how people are utilizing it. The overall traffic, the site visits, the average time people are spending on this site, what pages are they looking at most frequently, documents and stuff. I don't have a ton in here because it is a demo account, but you can also see things from like 30 days, 90 days, and then you can also see the devices that they're accessing it from. So if you learn that most of your users are using mobile devices, then you would maybe want to reevaluate how you're actually designing things. You probably would only want to use one column layouts for everything because there's no way a 2-column layout would even happen in the mobile device. So you could be a little bit more strategic in the design sense because every device that we work on has a different interface and has like a different screen size. So the nice thing about SharePoint is that it is responsive. Responsive means that if I go from a 25-inch monitor to a 12-inch monitor, everything kind of it shifts around and reshapes, but like nothing's cut off. Everything is still easily displayed. So while SharePoint is responsive, and even if you design it from a desktop perspective, it should kind of reshape to be a mobile layout. But that is something I still would encourage you to like test. I would open up your mobile phone and kind of see how it looks, because if things do look a little funky, or like you're seeing a lot of things are pixelated, like I said, that was pixelated and that kind of drives me crazy, then you can make sure that everything is in a layout that makes more sense for mobile devices versus desktop. You'll probably have a mixture, to be honest. As a student, I definitely used a little bit of both, but I think for most of my classwork, I would use a laptop in some sense, but that's never to say that I wouldn't use my mobile. But I personally use like Blackboard in college, and Blackboard is not friendly to mobile. Blackboard is pretty terrible on mobile devices, so I would always use my desktop, but SharePoint is mobile friendly, so people might be more willing to use it on the mobile. But always good to make data-driven decisions. So you do have some analytics to help out with that. And then another thing that I want to call out is your navigation. So we showed off the navigation in the 100 course. It's the exact same way. So if you want to add more navigation, you select edit, you see those plus signs, and then you choose, the option. Now, communication sites are slightly different with the navigation, so I do want to show that off real quick. So I'm going to go into my other site. And here we have the edit button right there. So we can select edit. Now, communication sites have the ability to have these cascading menus, while Team sites do not, Team SharePoint sites. So you can see that there's cascading menus within this navigation because there's these little indentations of the pages. So if you want to make a new page, I'll just say plus, and I'm just gonna say, since I was just talking about Blackboard, I guess I'll say Blackboard because a lot of universities use that. I don't know if Northwestern uses it, but a good amount do. And then I can just find Blackboard real fast. Okay, so I copy this, I copy, go back to my SharePoint site, wrong one, and paste that into there and say, okay. Now, right now, this is a completely separate page. So if I hit save, you can now see that Blackboard does appear, which you may want to just keep it there, and you can. But if you want to put it under, maybe remote learning, for instance, that would make sense. All we have to do is drag it on top of that. So we would take this Blackboard, left click and hold, and then we would drag it to its location. We'd have to scroll up though, so this one's a little bit more tricky. So let me kind of like paste it here. There we go, and then just scroll up a little bit. I wish it would scroll with me, but I guess it wants to be slightly difficult. There we go, remote learning. So place it on top of remote learning. Now you can see that there's a little indentation, so that indicates that it is a subpage. We can hit save, and now you can see that remote learning does have a drop-down menu and Blackboard is listed right there. So that's really the big difference when it comes to designing your sites. Now, the communication sites will have many more pages though. So unlike where I said Team SharePoint sites, you're kind of focusing on that one page. Communication sites, you're going to be developing a lot more pages. So all those design kind of tactics that I talked about are really, I would say, more crucial when it comes to the communication side of things. And same way on a Team SharePoint site, to generate like a new page, you just go to that new drop-down toggle, and then you'll have the option to create a page directly from here. Now, just glancing at my agenda real quick and seeing if there's anything else that I want to call out. So one other feature to call out is like alert me and permissions. So if I go back to my other site, I'm going to go back to my algebra site. If I want to receive like alerts, for instance, let's say in this class materials tab, and maybe even student work, we should have an option that says alert me. So if you'd like to get like some type of notification when new stuff is happening in your document library, this is a good tool. So I can go to the three dots, let alert me, and here I can choose alert me when items are changed. So like in this scenario, I'm the professor and I'm in the classwork. So this would actually be very helpful to me as probably a professor. So that way, anytime someone does submit their work, I get some type of notification. I can choose what type of notification that comes through. So by default, it's going to say student work. It's going to alert Kara. If I wanted to add anyone else to this, I could. I could also choose the delivery method, change the type. So do I want it when new items are added, when existing items are modified, or when items are deleted? Send alerts for these changes when this happens. So someone else changes the document, someone else changes the document created by me. So you can kind of like set up the conditional alerts, and then when to send the alert. Maybe you just want a weekly summary. At the end of the week, you want at Friday at 3 p.m. you want to have a summary, or vice versa. Maybe your assignment is due on Monday, so you can kind of like change that around. But that's another good tool to be aware of. It's located under the three dots. I'm not sure if you can do that per file. Yeah, you actually can do it. So if you want to do it per folder or file, You can also come to that individual folder or file, and you'll see the option to alert me, and you'll get a lot of similar options in here. So that's another kind of tool to stay on top of things. All right, well, that is everything that I do have for today. So I'd like to say a big thank you for joining. I hope you had some fun with me today. Like I said, this is my favorite session to teach because I love design and I love not coding. So best of both worlds. And if you do have any further questions or need support, please don't hesitate to reach out to these resources. They are in the Q&A at the very top. I also posted those other resources like the lookbook and the planning your site. So grab all those resources before you leave. And if you could please fill out the survey, this is for Northwestern's use. So if you have any feedback about how you're implementing the tools in your organization, training, you can really be very specific because it is for Northwestern. It's not for Microsoft, but I know they would really appreciate if you could take that for them. And that is also located in the Q&A. As a reminder, the session was recorded, so you can access it for the next 6 months. Be sure to save the link that you used today to get into the event, and that will become your on-demand recording. Thank you so much, everyone. That's all I have for you. And we hope to see you at future training sessions. Have a wonderful rest of your day.